This is a HeadGum podcast.
Who's that knocking at the door? It's all your friends, you filthy whore. Your husband's gone and we've got books and a bottle of wine to kill. It's Hollywood. It's books. It's gossip. I'm shook. It's memoirs. It's martinis. It's Studio 54. It's Celebrity Book Club. Come read it while it's hot. Celebrity Book Club. Tell your secrets, we won't talk. Celebrity Book Club. No boys are allowed. Celebrity Book Club. Say it loud and proud. Celebrity Book Club.
Buzz me in, I brought the Cuervo. What up? This is Chef Lily Murata.
And this is sous chef Stephen Phillips Horst.
And this is Celebrity Book Club.
Hey, best friend.
Hey, best friend.
I am very excited to talk about this week's book, which is none other than Momofuku, inventor, restaurateur, god of food.
Chef, god of food, TV personality.
Podcast personality.
Reinvented the bosom. 10:30 p.m. dining vibe.
Invented standing in line in 2008 for ramen.
Literally, which is what New York is now all about. We are talking about the hot new book, Eat a Peach.
The memoir by David Chang. As I was reading this, I was just being like, there's such a Joe Rogan energy to every single chef.
Oh my God, yeah. It's so...
Every single chef thinks that he invented everything that he's ever done. Like, anytime he has an idea, he's just like, and then my fucking mind exploded.
First line is always just like, so you want to open up a fucking restaurant? Don't. Yeah. Okay? Don't. Take my fucking advice and don't. Okay? Because cooking, it's for the misfits. It's for the convicts. It's for the alcoholics.
And I'm like, so everyone's an ex-con in every kitchen? No, I mean, obviously there's like seedy characters, but it's like chefs have this psychotic megalomania that I guess like it forces you, or I guess that you have to have.
You honestly have to have unless you're almost, you would be known for not being like a crazy egomaniac, and they would write about it and they'd be like, something in his Danish kitchen was different. Yeah, that's why people say, don't ever date a chef.
Well, also don't ever date a chef because they make shitty food when they get home because they're tired of making amazing food. Kind of like how you're a maid, but then you get home and you're like,
right,
I'm not cleaning.
I don't want to clean. Right. And it's funny that you brought up that because I feel like so much of what David Chang did with his food was like, I want to make food for the cooks getting off work.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how the bosom came about.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm already hungry talking about this book. The bosom, if you don't know,
it's a sort of reinvention of a traditional Korean meal that's usually with pork belly, which is kind of like tough. And then he made it with slow simmered pork shoulder. And it's a absolutely massive hunk of pork shoulder that you can get at Momofuku Sambar. They bring it out. You have to order it 24 hours in advance.
And the seatings are only at like non-dining hours.
It's like
5:30 or 10:30. It's
so
like
fucking badass.
So New York, it's just like, yeah, no, you're not gonna fucking get your bosom at 8 p.m. on a Saturday night.
But yeah, so you may be familiar with David Chang's Momofuku Empire of Restaurants. Obviously, the first was
Noodle Bar.
And then he opened Sambar. And then there was Ko. And then there was Ma Pash. Then there was Nishi. Then he has Las Vegas Restaurant City. He became, I think
Sydney restaurant.
A lot of chefs, celebrity chefs end up going the route of like doing the Vegas restaurant because it's like easy cash grab. And then they maybe do in LA or a London or, some other city with a lot of money, essentially. But just to back up for a second, let's just discuss the cover of the book.
Okay, yeah. I love the cover.
I love the cover.
It's gorgeous. And as much as we do talk about, like, we will talk about how he is, like, kind of a crazy rageaholic and egomaniac. Like, he is, I do think he does check himself in this book.
There's some checking.
It's checking yourself because if he didn't check himself,
it's checking himself in a self-conscious way to, like, look good so that people think that he's aware of, like, what an asshole he is. But, like, I don't really think substantively he is actually aware of what an asshole he is.
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, whatever. The cover is, he said in the beginning that he wanted, the editors were like, put your face on it. And he was like, I don't want my face on it.
I've never seen a book that the first chapter is all about his like neurotic conversations with the editor about what the cover looks like. This is like truly one of the most neurotic books I've ever read, which I kind of love.
No, I know. Like, that's why I am just like, he does check himself because every other page, he's just like, oh, but I did say the thing and I am cringing about this. And just like.
And if there's emails, every page has 16 footnotes on footnotes. It's like very footnoted. But yeah, so the cover is he's pushing a giant peach up a hill.
And there's like an ocean.
Which, do you remember the Greek myth that it evokes?
It's Siphidius?
Oh, let's Okay, I'm pouring Lily some sake, but
Pause for sake pour. It's like Dionysus and Sophenius or something.
okay,
No,
close.
me.
Dionysus isn't really involved in the myth.
You're a little more big Book of Greek myths.
Yes, I was big Book of Greek myths, and all faggots are big Book of Greek myths.
My sister was very also big. It's girls and faggots.
Well, I would say, big Book of Greek myths is kind of the original, like, the way that gay men have to watch any television show with a female protagonist, like, forever. It's very that because, like, the women, it's very gossipy, it's very soapy.
Zeus.
Super sudsy. And like, Zeus and Hera, everyone's having affairs and like killing each other over their affairs. And it's very dramatic. It's very sexual.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe I would have paid attention a little more in 4th grade if they showed a little more sex in the Greek myths.
So the myth that you got close to pronouncing was Sisyphus.
Sisyphus.
Who famously pushes a rock up a hill, and he's sort of condemned for all eternity to push this massive boulder up a hill, and then it comes back down again, and then he has to do it again.
Ringing a bell. And it's like that is kind of the metaphor for David Chang's career because he's just like a workaholic and like never feels like he's on top and is just like, I need to do the podcast, I need to open a restaurant, I need to have a magazine, I need to have 7 restaurants, which he claims are not for the money. But then it's like,
then bitch, you wouldn't have opened Las Vegas if you didn't care about the money.
It's just so cuckoo. He's like, like, I'm only opening Vegas to, like, have money for my, like, passion project magazine.
Well, but then he's also be just like, everything I do is just to get asses in seats because I want to feed people.
Right. You're like, asses in seats as in money. And so also he doesn't have dessert or coffee at Noodle Bar.
Right. Because he's like, we're not fucking doing this, like, bullshit sit around for 20 minutes after the check comes and have a coffee.
Truly lolled when he was like, yeah, no more time for your friend to tell, like, one more 20-minute story. And it's like,
no, that was actually one of my favorite parts of the book where he dragged the 20-minute story because it's so like you're starting a long-ass story when the check comes and it's like, wrap it up, bitch.
Yeah, and people see and you're like, please don't.
Yeah, because I do think the thing about the 20-minute story is it's the friend who hasn't kind of spoken up throughout the dinner, I think.
Oh, and they're kind of pushing it in at dessert and they're like, okay, so funny thing at work on Thursday. And
no, it's very the Simone, shall we say, the Simone of the friend group, the B-list girl who, like, after, like, not participating super hard, like, sees kind of a lull at the end, and she's like, this is my moment to tell this boring work story.
Well, because also when everyone gets the dessert menu, it's always like, I don't know. Should we?
I would
share if you want to get the pistachio panna cotta. I would have if you okay.
I would have a spoonful.
And everyone's like,
to my hand.
Okay, can we get 30 spoons?
No, 30 spoons and one like sorbet manna cotta, tiny pistachio leaf. But let's
go back a little.
I want to go back to the sort of origins of the 2000s and kind of what the New York restaurant scene was like then. Specifically what the New York restaurant scene was like vis-a-vis Asian food.
Yes.
Or talk about the first time you went to a Chang restaurant, whenever that was, and just...
I think let's talk about kind of a little bit of the landscape of 2008, because honestly, embarrassingly enough, I've only been to his Vegas restaurant.
That's really sad.
So, yeah, I can't believe I've like never been to Noodle Bar. It's like actually, it's illegal. I don't know what's wrong with me.
Yeah, I mean, you're diseased and you're poor and you should get that checked out. But I've been living in New York for about 36 years and I do remember.
By the way, this book made me feel so not accomplished, just like David Chang, like by 34, which is my age, he had already opened 6 restaurants.
Yeah, but he was also just starting a podcast and so are we. I think we're really right on track.
The same level.
We're right where he needs to be, baby.
No, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So if only my dad had leveraged his golf equipment store, maybe I would have opened up my hoagery.
Yeah. So just what you're referencing is the fact that David Chang was like, his dad owned a golf equipment store and he was a golf prodigy in Greater DC.
Golf prodigy, which is.
As a lesbian, you play golf.
As a lesbian, I play golf, and my dad once took me to a driving range while my sister was doing something fucking girly shit. So, I ranged as a kid. My father was not a Joe Chang. He was not a Andre Agassi's father, you know. He wasn't whipping me on the driving range.
And it's interesting because he was, you know, in many ways, he was a kind of classic immigrant father.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
he wasn't a drill sergeant.
Well, you know why? It's because...
I know why.
Yes, queen. I think because, Alec Baldwin says this perfectly in 30 Rock, is saying, you know, the first generation, they're an immigrant, they work at a factory. Then the next generation, they, you know, do all they can to become a doctor and just like go to school at night while working at the fast food place. Third generation, they become a snowboarder, podcast producer.
Yep. That's exactly what happens. Yeah.
So my grandfather, immigrant, my grandmother goes, your grandfather had Mad Hatter's disease. From working in the factories. The mercury, it's like an actual thing.
What?
That's where the Alice in Wonderland thing, both my grandparents had Mad Hatter's disease because they worked in the hat factories in New York. And it's the mercury that they used for the pillbox hats for the fedoras. How do you think they stood up?
Why is there mercury in a hat?
I don't know, darling, but there was.
Wait, so millinery is like actually one of the most toxic professions.
Yes. And so, you know, and my mom was like, so it made him very angry. So Joe, my grandfather, I think, was the kind of the Joe Chang. My dad is the David Chang.
Right. Your dad is the
I'm
sort of
Hugo.
striving professional, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's very true. It's like you have the working class parent who then, I mean, I think it's like, you know, my grandmother worked literally in factories, like making whatever, like.
Did she get Mad Hatter's disease? She
I
probably got something else.
think she had just like 50s wife disease where
yeah.
she was like overlooking abuse while like cooking bad meals kind of vibes. A lot of canned vegetables. But she was like, did make like whatever bombs in a factory for World War II or whatever. Was like assembling like rifles. And then my mom was like striving professional,
Right.
climbing to the top of the corporate ladder. And then of course I am a layabout podcaster, like,
Yeah.
But to sort of get back
to circle back,
to circle back
basically.
to 2000s New York.
Back then, it was all about reservation. I would say Momofuku landscape was these, you know, fancy things where it was fancy Italian and it's fancy French. But David Chang says there was like no like exclusive, basically like Asian restaurants, which I like don't believe.
So yeah, this is like one of my issues with him because he's always just like people wouldn't pay a lot for Asian food. It's like there's tons of very expensive.
He was also saying that you could people like only thought good food was paying $60 for a steak.
It's like no, people do appreciate.
Like it's called like St. Mark's. I feel like he was a little bit acting like St. Mark's didn't exist and like there wasn't izakayas where you can like get grilled.
He acted like he invented St. Mark's. He also acted just like people weren't willing to pay more money. It's like you and I were going to Chang Shou, the like fancy Chinese restaurant in Cambridge after like every school play like for years.
Oh, I miss Chang Shou.
It's like liberal moms like love to pay like $30 for an entree like at a Chinese restaurant. I also think that he has kind of a weird blind spot when it's like Japanese.
Well, he doesn't talk about it's like I think he's not talking about sushi, you know, because we're not talking about.
But Japanese food is behind French cooking is the most like
expensive,
lauded like national culinary art like in the world. It's like the precision, the expertise, the technique,
but I think
the attention to French ingredients, like Japanese food. And like if you look at the 3-star Michelin restaurants in New York, the only one that's not French is Masa. It's like that is which is sushi. It's like people will pay a gazillion dollars
for sushi.
For sushi.
But I don't think he's talking about sushi. I think he's talking about Korean food. He's talking about Vietnamese food. He's more talking about, you know, how
absolutely.
just like people, if, you know, I would say in 2004, if someone, that's the thing. It's like, if you were like, yeah, this like pho is like $27, people would be like, what the fuck? Like, I can go to Chinatown and get like pho for like $6.75. It's like this total hole in the wall. Like, why would I do that?
Yes. I think he's totally right that there was, I think, a lack of upper middle price tier.
Yes. We're talking like the 23.
To the 23 price tier of like Asian food that was like respected as like hot restaurants because you had, but then it's like, this gets back to the landscape of the 2000s. Momofuku came up in the age when Asian restaurants in New York were like Megu, Tao, Buddha Bar. Like basically it was a nightclub restaurant.
Just full Sex in the City.
Where you have a massive iced Buddha. Like these restaurants are so funny.
And he did this thing that annoys me that's like, people are so fucking obsessed with the East Village narrative. And again, like, it's like
saying that, like, when I first went there,
no one was there. It's like,
there were
it's
syringes
04?
in the street.
Right. Oh, you couldn't walk with a heroin addict, like, pushing you out of the way. It's like, you're acting like the East Village when you opened Momofuku was the same as Patti Smith's East Village. Who
Even Patti Smith?
I mean,
I'm sorry.
what I'm
Was Patti Smith ever fucking like attacked? Like,
no, she's carrying as well. Patti Smith. It's like everyone. If the word East Village, you know, it's just like they're just so horny for that narrative. That's like, oh, it was fucking boozers and sailors and losers, and everyone had knives.
No, there's this like gentrifier savior narrative
Yes.
that like that Danny Meyer does, that David Chang does, that like everyone does, where they're kind of just like, yeah, like no one would even respect this neighborhood until I went and opened up like a restaurant that served $22 entrees at, and it's like, congratulations, like you have to be so fucking
David
brave
Chang
to like go
claiming
to some
that
neighborhood.
he invented the East Village. I was like, absolutely miss me with this one.
Simmer.
Yeah. Okay, also, chefs, I mean, they're literally out of control. It's just like, so when he signs the lease for Noodle Bar, it's also like always just like, I wasn't fucking sleeping. Just like, please, my apartment, it was a futon covered in vomit. I unplugged the fridge, you know, these dramatic narratives. Yet, I mean, I believe it. Running a restaurant is really hard.
No, it's really hard because you have to like work a lot.
Like,
and it's
work
like
a lot.
not something I could really do.
So this is also where we get to know his full rage problem, where he's like, I don't fucking even need servers.
Yeah,
Is so insane.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, I get the sort of antipathy between back of the house and front of the house, because front of the house gets a lot of credit. Front of the house, like, the customers interact with and love and they praise. And, like,
well, the biggest problem,
you have this back of the house that's, like, everyone, like, in a cramped, hot kitchen, like, working their asses off.
making the food that is
making
going to
the
get
actual
reviewed.
food and, like, doing much harder work than just fucking walking around.
No, I mean, the biggest problem, probably one of the biggest problems in the restaurant industry that I feel like Danny Meyer is, like, trying to solve with the whole, like, tips are included is that just, like, any cook is still just basically making like $11 an hour, and then like servers can make up to $100,000 a year.
Right, because they are getting this.
The tips.
Well, but I think don't a lot of restaurants do tip out, like, where
So
they
a lot of them
combine it
do,
all and they
yeah.
and the back of the house gets as much as the front of the house in terms of like
So-
it's all
but it totally
equitably-
varies.
Yeah, right.
So,
And there aren't sort of standards in place.
So, you know, right. It's like, not that being a server is not like also very hard and like one of the most like stressful jobs like ever, but I'm just saying
I mean, it's not that hard. Gay people can do it, so it can't be that hard.
Sorry, I would just like to recall a memory of when you trailed to be a host for my ex-girlfriend, and you failed so bad. And I remember she came home and she was just like, Steven was like so awkward in his trail and just like
I wasn't cut out for that vibe. I mean, I did end up being an usher at City Winery for like.
no, and we applaud your usher.
Thank you. But like that was as much as I could do, was take people to their seat and then like maybe tell them what wine to get out of the like 4 wines that were available at this like Sinead O'Connor concert at City Winery.
Why were only 4 wines available at a winery? Oh, because they're selling their own wines.
They're selling their own wine, so they have like have a Cab, they have a Merlot, they have a Sauvignon, whatever.
My restaurant, that's why I kind of went in my kind of artist day job. I went made because I can just like be alone and sloppy and like listening to headphones and like do physical labor versus like restaurant industry. I worked one restaurant job in the middle of college.
You failed a restaurant job so hard.
My sister like got me a job at this Mediterranean restaurant, and I like worked for, and it was just like a very just like it was in Medford, Greater Boston. And after 2 days, the owner just like gave me $80 and was like, "We'll call you," and never got called again. Like I think people are like, "Lily, you work in a restaurant? Please, you're gonna drop all the plates."
And I agree with that. So anyway, back to David Chang for a quick second.
Chang, yeah.
So Chang started Momofuku in the mid 2000s amidst this sort of like big nightclub Asian restaurant like vibe, and was the first person to be like, in his mind, he's like, he had spent time in China and Korea and had like seen like, really good food being given to the working man and like great dumplings
and
being served
he
to, like,
also
the
had
factory workers.
Worked at, the great Tom, the Tom Colicchio's restaurant.
So this is, I think that is really interesting about him, where it's like, as a child, he was a golf prodigy.
Oh, also he was raised like super crazy Christian.
Which
I think totally, he doesn't like, I feel like, as not to maybe offend his parents, I don't know what, but it's like, I just feel like that totally informs like his rage and insecurity.
Yeah. Well, literally everyone in his family is like a missionary.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and he was like going to church and then Sunday school and then like
everything was church.
Yeah. Which is a very immigrant family and it's very Korean American. And it's like, obviously we know like Christianity has a lot of repression.
Like really repressed. Yeah.
So it makes sense that would come out in this anger. And he does admit, like, he talks about his therapist a lot in the book, and he's always just like, and like everything with Dr. Elliot does come back to my parents, ultimately.
Right. He kind of does that like classic therapy thing where you're just like, yep. And obviously, everything in your life, it goes back to your parents. And here's the thing. It's like, his dad was just like, yes. Like, he basically, I feel like the root of all of his anger is in his childhood.
Yeah.
The
go-kart incident.
The go-kart. He's in a go-kart. He basically breaks his leg, and his dad doesn't take him to the hospital for 5 days.
They do this. It's very like 1950s, and it's like they're racing go-karts down the street. And he kind of falls out of his go-kart, and it runs over his leg, and it like breaks his leg or something. And he's like laid up on the couch for days, and the dad is just being very stern and just like, "You're fine." Like,
right,
I'm not
like
taking
man up,
like being so Sarah Palin and man up. And then at one point he takes him to an acupuncturist.
Oh, like so when and David Chang asks him like later on, he's like, literally all your friends were doctors, yet you took me to this like famous acupuncturist
for like literally a broken leg. And then like when he finally gets an X-ray, they're like, yeah, like it's broken, like you need to set it, like it'll be better. And so obviously like everything in his life and the insane chip on his shoulder stems from his parents.
From this broken leg and Christianity. But then his father becomes, who is the one who basically, that's why he can open Noodle Bar at 26, is
gives
because
him the loan.
His dad gives him the loan and raises money within like their entire community in like Richardson, Virginia or whatever, basically gives him $100,000.
Yeah. Because his dad was like part of like, it seems like was almost part of a cabal, I want to say, like an actual like price fixing community of Korean golf store owners in different neighborhoods of Greater DC, where they each had a different territory and they like agreed to like charge a certain amount.
Right, and then later on he finds out when I think he opens up Som or Co that his dad leverages the golf business again.
So his dad was a huge supporter of his, like.
But it's also classic. It's like his dad, he only found out his father's love because his father was leveraging his golf company.
They could never say the words.
I love you. This is crazy. His therapist doesn't tell him he is bipolar till very recently because he knew that if he told him that he was bipolar, he would like. This is also like giving him like, he's like, I'm such an obsessive, like he's like, I'd research my bipolarness like too much if I knew I was bipolar.
I find him to be a little bit obsessed with his like own kooky girl narrative. Like in this way where he's like, and then it turns out I was like even crazier than that. I'm such a hypochondriac. I'm like so neurotic. I have to like drink to fall asleep, and I'm like super angry, and like no one likes me. But it's like, babe, I'm still just hearing me. And like one thing I will say that kind of bothered me about this book versus Anthony Bourdain's book, Kitchen Confidential, is in Bourdain's,
which we'll do at some point.
Which we'll have a separate episode.
I mean,
about.
Also, this book can't exist without Kitchen Confidential.
It doesn't exist without Confidential, and Bourdain's a big character in this book, and we'll get to their relationship, which I think is beautiful. But in Bourdain's book, Chang so basically right after he like can't be a golf prodigy anymore because he like gains a ton of weight and gets huge in high school, and then he like throws off his swing, and now he's like this big boy who can't play golf. He like goes to culinary school. And what I do find insane about his career is that he literally just goes from culinary school to working at Kraft under Tom Colicchio and then working at fucking Cafe Boulud, like one of the like most like high level, expensive, like fancy restaurants in the city. It's like, wait, where was your like toiling up the ladder?
Here's the thing I feel like about like being a chef is like, I think you can like, if you're just like, I come in and you're like, I want to be a little bitch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you do be a little bitch.
Be a
and
little
then-
bitch.
Yeah. And then
Well-
they're just like, okay, why don't you scrub this for 7 hours? And then you work your way up.
He talks about the guy who went to Astance in Paris and like showed up every day for 4 months with his knives, being like, I want to work. And they were like, no. And then after 4 months, they were like, fine. And now he like
Exactly.
has his own Michelin restaurant.
So there you go. And that's why it's like, I mean, to roast this narrative, but you do have to be psycho.
You have to be psycho and desperate.
Yeah. And you have to be like, yes. I mean, as he says in the end, in his like epilogue of 33 reasons, like to become a chef or whatever, it's like, you have to like not care about a clock. You can't like want to hang out with friends. You can't have a life. Like
You're never going on Friday again, bitch. Sorry.
it's a very I feel like the mentality when I sold Christmas trees that they were trying to put on me, just being like, you're not gonna fucking have a life. Like this job isn't for everyone. Like we eat, sleep trees. And it's like, at least with being a chef, you're like, you have a drive to do it. But
Well,
I
you're
was
also
like,
creating something.
you're
like,
creating something
you
like
weren't really, like-
gorgeous. I was like,
You weren't really creating like new trees.
I was like, I'm just
You're like,
trying
I'm
to
so
make
fucking proud of this tree.
right. It's like, yes, if you're doing like a gorgeous like,
I mean,
scallop crudo,
Were
absolutely.
you ever proud of any of your Christmas tree sales when you worked at that Soho Christmas tree
Oh,
stand?
I was. Well, I also decorated wreaths. That then I would decorate a wreath. They would sell for what, $120?
Oh, wait, so you actually had a huge creative outlet.
Yeah. Well, I started as a wreath decorator, and then they saw something in me, and they moved me to sales. I think they saw that I was lesbian, and because all the tree salesmen were just Russian men, and they put all like the girls and like one gay guy in like the wreath decorating tent. And we just like put cones on shit, and then they like sell it for like $200. This is, I'll name drop it, Soho Christmas Trees. And it was run by the most insane David Chang guy. And he like, I cried many times. He would scream at me.
You would scream about your mise en place for
Because
your tree.
they worked on this whole crazy thing. It was like a good cop, bad cop, where their prices were like tiered and it was kind of all opinionated. So I would give a price and I'd be like, oh, this tree is like $320, and someone would just be like, that's insane, and I'd be like, well, let's go see what the guy at the trailer says.
Oh, and then he would be like, how about this? I'll give it to you for $280 and I'll throw in the wreath for only $10.
And then he would ream me out and like scream at me
in front of
in
the
front of the
customer.
people, and
so they
then
would feel so bad that they would
for
buy
you,
the
yes.
tree.
Then they buy the tree, then they like
That
give me 20.
is psycho.
And then I'm like 24. I'm
Wow.
just like, this is one of my like first jobs in New York. I'm like crying, just like it's like 20 degrees.
You using the like their sympathy.
Yes, using the sympathy, and it's like these Soho people just being like, this is so fucking awkward. Like all I
mean-
want is a Christmas tree, and now I'm like wrapped in this like insane,
And this
like
insane emotional
volatile-
saga. And yet it worked.
It worked.
Anyway, I feel like just to bring it back to
No,
Chang
let's
for a
bring it
second,
back to Chang.
I had a sort of like comparison that I wanted to make to the Bourdain book and the way that Bourdain sort of talks about the restaurant industry is that I do think, as much as David Chang tries to acknowledge his rageaholism and like say that he's like can be an asshole, whatever, I do not think that he really like elevates the people in his book who are the dishwashers and are the line cooks and are the like the servers and like everyone else in the restaurant industry. He is very much like taken with like chef culture, and I think like with like big male like badass chef culture, and Bourdain like is as well, but Bourdain's book is all about the people of the kitchen, and he's always just being like, yeah, man, like me and the fucking Ecuadorians and the Puerto Ricans, like
Yes,
we
like-
get together and we like slap each other's ass, we go out for drinks afterwards, and like we fuck each other's wives, and like there's this like celebration of the kind of like all of
in
the
this way, you
undersung
could-
people.
Well, I
and-
will say, I think why that's true is because like why I think Bourdain is also such an amazing like writer and became this figure is because like Bourdain was like never actually an amazing chef.
Yeah.
He like Bourdain, and Chang says this, like is heartline cook, and that's why
and
he is
never,
like
he
me
never
and the
worked at a Michelin star restaurant.
He never worked at. It's like he worked at Le Hall, which is just like a fide. His main thing was just like this fide French restaurant.
That
and
was
it's
like so steak frites for business guys at 10 p.m.
Right,
Just like
and it's
fire
like-
it up and send it out.
worked in all these P-Town, whatever. And it's like he became famous because of Kitchen Confidential, because he was like, this is the heart of the restaurant. And I think that's just like why he is wise. And it's like Chang is a visionary, but like
But he
he's
only
like,
cares
is-
about the James Beard Awards. He cares about the Michelin stars. He is an elitist who like is obsessed with this world.
Well, he does. I mean, he does love his team.
he loves his team at the award show. He loves his team at certain moments when he says, I took my whole team out for drinks. But he obviously doesn't love his team every day. Or you would hear more about the team. You don't hear about a single fucking line cook or dishwasher. You hear about the Christina Tosi. You hear about like the famous pastry chefs and like other people who went on
who's risen. It's
to
like
become.
He only cares about other chef rock stars.
Yes, he cares about people who've like
Paul Karma, like everyone who ends up runs his restaurant. But he does love the narrative of just like, she showed up. It's like him. She showed up as an intern.
It's
and
like
now
so,
she's the CEO. But right, he's
you know
never
what it
just
is?
like.
It's very Mark Cuban. Like he's very just like every time on Shark Tank, then someone says, I sold every last like tchotchke that I had to make $300 to start my business, and like we invested every penny right back into the business. And Mark Cuban is just like, you are the American dream. It's like, that's David Chang, where he's just like, he likes people who like fucking work so hard and show up at 4 a.m.
Right. It's like his whole thing is that when someone comes in, like one person like asked like, when do we get off or something like that? And he like reams them out.
A Nazi.
And this is also when he thinks, this is past his point, when he thinks he's like overcome because he goes through this crazy executive training and he thinks he's overcome the rage. And then it comes back, and he's always like, at the end of it, he was like, I was not proud of it. I was not happy about that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, maybe someone needs to yell at you. And he like is so proud of himself because
the sort of liberal addendum to the book.
No, where he's like, and George Floyd was murdered, and so I've published this book 4 months after that. And you're like...
And he's just like, and I've realized that there's a lot going on in the world and there's a lot of work to do. And I want to be a part of that change.
And in this Kamala Biden administration...
And he talks about going to the state dinner at the Obamas and how Jill Biden...
Oh, wait. I did. That was the most like RBG pilled insane thing where he gets sat next to...
Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
And he's like, I don't know like what to call like...
a Supreme Court justice?
So I was like...
Justice Ginsburg.
Justice Ginsburg, and he goes, and then footnote.
None other than
Dr. Jill Biden said, it's Madame Justice to you. And it's like, can the moms actually though like calm down for
the absolute
2
insane
seconds?
Matto-pilled mom energy where it's like, okay, so Dr. Jill Biden for the past 14 years has just been correcting people about middle-aged women's titles.
Which is, I feel like I don't know if Jill Biden is a TERF, but like it is very.
It's so TERF. I mean, she has bangs.
Yeah, she has the TERF bangs. And it's so like, Jill Biden would like misgender someone, but would actually just be like, it's Madame. So I lulled at that. It also made me think, have you ever seen the episode of No Reservations where...
No Reservations.
No Reservations. Where Bourdain and Obama get Tsingtaos.
Here's the thing about Bourdain. That episode to me is everything I hate about the moment we live in. Like, that is... Bourdain, I think, is an amazing guy, and yet, to me, he became... what I hate about I will say it, and I've said it before, the pandemic of earnestness in our society, the true pandemic, which is just like lionizing these just like cool dads in Zegna jackets, just like having fucking...
It's a Xenia.
Emilia
Xenia.
Having fucking street food because they're not afraid to come down and eat with real fucking people, man.
It's actually, this book is a little bit why it's so opposite from Bourdain is because like
Bourdain's not invited to those fucking chef conferences. He's not with the chef
David
of Noma.
Chang is like not having sex.
Oh, there's zero sex in this book. Well, he mentions dating girls and not working out, and then he meets his wife, and they're like married.
Well, and then you know what I realized
again, like the Christianity, I think that he's maybe just more prude and won't talk about it.
No. I think there was sex, and
I'm not saying I don't think he's a virgin until he meets his wife.
Oh, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm just saying, I think even by his time in the Momofuku landscape, I think he was like fucking girls, but like. But I really think he was much more like cooking till 2, going out, getting wasted, and like going home and passing out and ordering a pizza. Like he was like getting in relationships, and then I think he was like screwing them up. But it was less like, I got a blowjob in the walk-in from the waitress.
Yeah, no, there's no blowjobs in the walk-in. Whereas the Bourdain book is like every other second, he's just like, and the fucking bride is there on her wedding night, and I see my sous chef railing her behind the low boy. Like, it's like, okay.
Oh, wait, this is what's so insane. And again, it like back to his ego. When he talks about courting his wife, Grace, is he's like, we met at a barbecue and we had our courtship. And he's like, we're hanging out at my apartment. He's like, and then like my other chef friend comes over and she comes over with our other mutual friend who's actually like a really famous porn star. And so he's like, yeah, so they came over and just like, we just like started like riffing and she didn't like blink an eye and she like totally liked my friends. And then we watched BoJack and like Orsa and I was like, ew, I was like cringing. I was like, I threw the book. I was like, oh, straight people actually stop for 2 seconds.
I actually threw up in my mouth. I was just like, I'm sorry. You were impressed by a chick because she could hang with your fucking
hang with
badass friend and like this fucking porn star and then watch BoJack Horseman. Like, what fucking chick can do that? It was like, this is like something about Mary disease where it's like, you don't actually like, where a guy just thinks like a girl's guy, but it's like I guess the 2020 version of something about Mary where it's like, you think that a fucking guy's girl is like someone who can watch BoJack Horseman.
Right. It's like not about her watching football. It's not this like 80s girl who's like, will watch football. It's like, she's watching BoJack, which my Spanish teacher, who was like a white guy Spanish teacher, who like married this Brazilian girl, and he was like, so we went for a fucking hike in the Grand Canyon, and he was like, the night before I was gonna propose, I took her. This is so David Chang, to an Allman Brothers concert, and I needed to make sure that she could fucking rock out at the Allman Brothers concert. And this is also him telling his students about his like weekend getting engaged. Okay. Like we're all supposed to applaud it. And then he fucking did propose on the Grand Canyon day after she loved the Allman Brothers concert.
Can I say what this is though? This is straight people like don't know each other.
Oh, well, yeah, that like, defines, that's why straight people, like, marriages last for a long time.
No, they last forever because they're like literally a straight guy and a straight girl, like, they don't know anything about each other.
They just need one thing.
They need one common interest, and they're like, cool, we both like this one. We both like Bon Iver. We're gonna date for 35 years. It's like, what? Like, there's nothing in common. They like do not speak the same language. It's like,
but that's almost probably why like straight people stay together longer than like, gay people, because like gay people want to fucking talk about everything and process everything, and we need to like.
Well, as you know, lesbians stay together forever.
Yeah,
You've never been in a relationship shorter than 11 years.
Okay.
I want to talk about Nishi for a second.
Yes, which I've never been.
Okay.
And
it's now closed, so you'll never go.
And I'll never go. And, you know, as we know, I'm Italian.
Right.
And reading it, of course, I was like, I feel like that was the thing. I was so mad that I've never been. And the whole book talks about how he got the worst reviews for it.
Yeah.
Because it was at the end of his career and people were so much harsher on him, namely Pete Wells.
I think it was A, people were harsher, but B, with good reason, because it pushed the sort of Momofuku brand too far. So the Momofuku brand is like, we're stripping down a lot of the Western conventions of hospitality that you're familiar with, because like he wants to evoke some of that like feeding really good. Well, not so. I think I'm more just like the more bare bones. Like
you're getting the food.
You're getting the food, and
yeah,
the food
and it's
is the
about
star.
the food. It's not about just like. So
it's not about a sommelier. I mean,
are we still working?
It's not about are we still working. It's also like he's kind of anti-som. Like he references at one point. He's like, I don't know what the fuck a sommelier does.
Well, I remember years ago reading some David Chang interview, and he was just like, I like Miller High Life. I want piss beer, which I love. It's like, you know, it's like and especially I think with some like sorts of spicy food, the best thing is like a Miller High Life.
Sure.
Modelo, you know.
Anyway, so Nishi was his restaurant. He opened in 2016 in Chelsea, and the concept was at first he wanted to open in Fuku, and then which is the fried chicken chain, and then in very Momofuku fashion, they're constantly reiterating and changing. He was like, actually needs to be something totally different. And so he was like, let's do this kind of like Italian, but like with Asian ingredients. And like, let's think about what it would be like if like a Korean family was like dropped off in Turin and like had to use the ingredients there, and like, what would they make? Or like vice versa.
Well, it was also about, I think, this chip on his shoulder about challenging the Italian food prices versus Asian
Right.
food prices.
Which we did touch on earlier.
Yeah.
But, well, okay, there is a moment in an episode of Ugly Delicious I watched where he's at this dumpling place with Ali Wong, the comedian.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just like, you would pay like $28 for 6 raviolis, but you never pay $28
For
for
6
6
dumplings.
dumplings. And he goes, doesn't that make you mad? And then Ali Wong just goes, I don't know, that doesn't make me mad. She's like, I don't want to pay $28 for 6 dumplings. And she was like, and if Italian people like want to like overpay for raviolis, like that's kind of their
That's
issue.
their
That's their
problem.
problem. And like, I don't need to like blow up the spot and like have every dumpling cost $28. That's not really my end game here.
I also do love, just to bring it back for a second, to when he first opened Noodle Bar and he thought that he had to do dumplings but he didn't have time for it and
Right.
he just scrapped it. And I thought that was just like cool that he was like, I'm actually don't need to like do this like labor intensive dumpling service. Let's just scrap the dumplings, which I just thought as a business person, from
Yeah.
a business standpoint,
As a person of business experience.
yeah, super business experience. I was like, that's super cool because it's like, I feel like it is so white person to be like coming to an Asian restaurant and they're like looking at the menu and they're like, where are the dumplings? The dumplings are like, I'm kind of like into eating all the dumplings.
Well, and I think that this is a real strength of David Chang and what he did to food is to like, kind of changing expectations of dinners, because when you go into a French restaurant, when you go into a Japanese restaurant, when you go into a Chinese restaurant, you have an expectation of a certain
what's
kind
going
of
to be
food
there?
and what's going to be
what
there.
you want to eat.
And I think he sort of changed people's expectations and opened their minds to being like, I don't necessarily have like a rubric for what I think this restaurant's going to give me, and I'm open to it, and like the flavors can be louder and like, or they can be more delicate, and I won't necessarily like be upset at like what I'm getting. Anyway, Nishi was like offered up as this like Momofuku, so like stripped down bare bones, but also like
Italian
elevated
and
So
like
we're
28. We're talking 28 to 36
And
price point, maybe.
20 to 36 price point, and we're making everything like, instead of Parmesan, we're using like
Oh my God. I really wanted to. So he talks about this chickpea. So he talks
Using-
about, a famous Roman dish, cacio e pepe.
Right.
And it's basically just as you talk in, may I bring up your pras, your grub street, it's, adult backcountry. It's just like butter, Parmesan, Grana Padano.
Sorry,
like,
I can't.
pepper.
I literally can't even understand what you're saying because you're speaking in like such insane Chica voice.
Okay. Basically, whatever, cacio e pepe,
Yes.
famous pasta dish is just like cheese,
Yes.
butter, pepper. And he takes the chickpea and ferments it so it basically becomes like cheese
Yeah.
to use in this pasta, which
Which
I was kind of like, okay, pandemic. Winter goals, I like want to ferment.
Well, it's very
chickpeas.
molecular gastronomy, and he looks up to the guy from El Bulli, which is like famous for its molecular gastronomy. Like
Oh,
the
we
Spanish
haven't
restaurant.
even talked about the Noma.
We need to talk about Noma because he also fucking drags. Well, let me just get back to Nishi.
Yeah,
So,
we'll finish Nietzsche and then get to the pebbles.
Here's my point. I went to Nishi in one of the first 2 weeks that it opened.
Here's Steven's point. He's been to a lot of expensive restaurants.
I go to a restaurant. I went with my brother and his girlfriend at the time because at the time it was walk up only, and we just like happened to get a table, and it was insanely packed. The tables were like the thinnest like dowels you've ever seen. The seats were like these backless tiny wooden cubes that literally Kate Moss would not have fit on. Like it was the most uncomfortable.
Okay, so it in the book.
No.
So
All the reviews that said it was a very uncomfortable experience were dead right because it was very uncomfortable to sit. It was incredibly loud. There was no fabric in it. Let me tell you something. If you're opening a restaurant, okay, and if it's going to be popular, you need fabric to absorb sound or people won't be able to hear each other talk. You need a carpet or a carpet on the wall or a banquette or something. You can't just have wooden tables, wooden chairs, tile floor, like unfabricated walls because the sound's going to bounce off. It's going to be insane. I could not hear people talk. It was so crowded. It took 3 hours to get the dish. And the thing is, so the dish was like elevated, like expensive, sexy food. It was very cool.
Yeah.
But it was like, this isn't, the experience felt very oppressive and like not worth it. It wasn't like.
and this is coming from someone you don't mind a loud restaurant.
No, I love a loud restaurant, but it's
because
like.
I was saying reading all these, I like to hear you say that, to hear you say the seats were uncomfortable. Because I think when people who live in New York who are like, oh my God, my parents are coming to town, like they're like, they always want to be like, I'm cool and I'm going to take you to this cool restaurant. And it's like, what happens time and time and again, I think, is like these dads sit down. and they're like, this is not a seat.
Moms in their backs.
Dads in their butts. It's basically, and so when I read that, I was like, so how uncomfortable, were these chairs? And the food sounded like crazy delicious.
The food was really cool.
But for even you to be like, no, seriously, like the seats were like
I think this is where Chang misses the mark, because I think that, like, there is an expectation of, like, a certain amount of refinement of the food to have. It needs a little bit more space to, like,
By the way,
appreciate it.
he gets horrible reviews for Nishi, and he almost commits suicide over the reviews,
I'm
which
a
is
little bit like, are you being dramatic? I mean, I know he has issues with the mental health. Maybe he's not.
I truly think he probably like did in this like epic chef way where it's like they're always on the brink.
Yeah. What I do remember from Nishi is,
what did you get?
Like
A pasta?
It was like some tiny little pasta with like edible flowers on it. But what I remember about the plates, and this is what I want to say, it was the first time that I had seen like a heavy ceramic plate with a very small lip, a heavy ceramic circular plate with a small lip. And that was the start of that plating trend.
Yeah.
And like now that is literally the Dimes plate. Like it is like the common plate of like a kind of pretentious,
rough
like
ceramic.
uncomfortable wooden backless seat restaurant is the heavy ceramic plate with the small lip. And then it got to me thinking. It got to me thinking about plate evolution.
Right. Oh, that's actually super fun.
Okay, so here's how I see it. So the 90s to me was like really, really big plate, very small actual serving area in the center of the plate at an expensive restaurant. And like the more plate that didn't have food, the more you were like, oh, this is an expensive restaurant. This is fancy. I'm paying for plate. Is what I'm paying for.
Which I want to talk about this foraged restaurant I went to 2 years ago with my girlfriend's family.
Okay. Oh, that restaurant. Was that so large plate, tiny portion?
Yeah, and it was huge.
So
it was an only foraged. Everything was foraged in the restaurant, and we got the most ridiculous dish I've probably ever gotten in my entire life.
Sure.
So they come over and they're like, it's like a pappardelle with mushrooms or whatever. And it's a husband and wife team. Wife is the chef, husband, fedora, was the server. And he tells us that the eggs that have made the pasta are from nomadic chickens. And they took basically the chickens on a road trip so that the chickens would get different they would eat in different places, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine. And it's like, okay, so
the New Hampshire grass is so different.
So
it's actually, ironically, it's actually grassier.
And it's just like, okay, so now like you're making these chickens so fucking nauseous. You've burned how much fuel? Can we talk about that climate change?
The chickens in the back of this truck just like, girl, where are we going now?
Yes.
Can I lay my eggs and get it over with?
So these chickens have gone to fucking 4 states, eaten different grains across like the tri-state. And we end up, and it was with this gorgeous pasta that was absolutely gorgeous, but the plate was massive and then little indent with the pasta in it. So we're just getting so much surface.
Yeah.
Little indent.
You're paying for surface area.
Yeah. And then this pasta, and it's just like the amount that the chickens ate from 5 different states.
Could you taste it? Could you taste the Vermont dirt?
I truly could not taste the Vermont dirt, and now I'm not a dirt som.
No, you're not, and you need to work on your palate.
Yeah.
I will say Nordic cuisine is...
I just feel like those people, they wanted to be Nordic, they wanted to be pebble.
Yeah. The pebblery is out of control.
And sometimes you have to make up your foraging system, so they were like, fuck, let's drive chickens around for a week.
Well, right, because it's like at Nome or whatever, they're like, okay, like we found some random farmer who like feeds his chicken like only this like whatever type of wheatgrass and like blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And it's like, we're just kind of pulling shit out of our ass at this point in the tri-state. We're just like, no, actually, I took the chicken to Montreal.
Oh, really? It's like Montreal-based grain.
I went
and then they told us at this restaurant, it was so crazy because we were like, oh, like, do you guys like forage in New York? And then they got like so crazy and offended. And we're just like, we would never forage in New York.
It's
because
like, aren't you supposed to be local?
Right, because the chemicals. And so now you're this like fucking outsourced forager.
Oh, and now he thinks you're like a Dow chemical lobbyist.
Right, but then they gave us a honeycomb for dessert.
That was sourced in New York.
That was sourced from a block away. So I'm just like,
well, the bees.
The bees are different.
Calling in collapse. Thank you.
Celebrity Book Club.
Segment menu. There we go.
There we go.
So the segment menu is prefix, and there's a what does she wear, what does she eat, and how does she live. And it'll be 35.
And if you want an additional wine tasting, that's an additional 37.
Sorry, I actually misspoke. It's 235, and then add truffles, it's 70. Additional 70, so it's 295.
Okay, so let's do how does he live?
So how does he live?
So I watched whatever in the first episode.
Did you
of
see
Ugly
his house in
Delicious.
Ugly Delicious?
Yeah. It is kind of cool. It's very big drawer wood paneled.
Like walnut.
It's walnut, light walnut, half open, I would say. Like there's an island, but it's not, half of it is closed. It's like you can walk up to the island, but it's not like massive open kitchen. But then the living room is just kind of like so big sectional. It's like comfort,
Well, what's funny is that so during his whole opening Momofuku era when he's becoming a chef, like
I was
his
gonna say,
style,
it's like nasty.
It's nasty.
Yeah.
It's very mattress on the floor. It's very the style
Straight
that
guy
like
meme, like
but like that girls on Twitter pretend that they don't like, but they're actually obsessed with of just like guys who have a mattress on the floor and like are alcoholic fuckboys.
Right.
And, like,
he talks about like how he fully like unplugged the fridge and it was just like nasty and nothing's on the walls and it's pizza boxes.
And
So
now
I
I
think
guess,
now
like,
that he's
super-
married, I feel like he has this rug that I saw. There was a New York Times article about that's called The Rug. That's like this Amazon
don't
rug.
you think that his wife owns the jacket?
Oh, his wife owns the jacket.
This-
The jacket is this jacket I got for my sister for Christmas.
But it's the jacket that like I saw a TikTok about Tribeca Wives and literally this girl was like, you need the jacket. And it's this like loose kind of like boxy, flappy, pockety, like down, like puffy jacket.
Well, and my sister says she gets like nods from people who have the jacket when she
Stop.
sees her in the
Other
jacket.
jacketers
Yeah.
literally like give each other the
Yeah,
nod
and
of
there's like
recognition.
this jacket sisterhood of being like wink the jacket, but she also is just like
I mean, it's the most Alison Roman culture thing of just being
she's
like the jacket, the stew,
rug.
the rug, the apartment.
And in the rug article, it was like before there was the jacket, there was the rug. Anyway, so I feel like his house, it's like
No, they have the rug. I mean, that's what I mean. I think that they're very just kind of like bland neutrals
Well, it's
like,
bland this
like
way.
elevated Wayfair.
I will say like when I've like cleaned, I feel like they live in like randomly like a Flatiron 7th Ave, 6th Ave, 17th place.
Yeah.
And unless he still lives in the East Village, and I've seen the homes there. It's very just like they're so close to Bed Bath and Beyond.
Yeah.
The home
takes on a BB&B
takes on a
vibe.
BB&B where it's like the organization is so B&B.
There are bins.
It's bins. It's method spray.
Yeah.
It's
It's not as nice as it should be.
No, because also it's chef life. It's like they're so busy. It's comfortable. You know.
So, what does he wear? Okay,
he wears like working like it's like it's kind of Everlane, I want to say.
Well,
his
here's
style.
my thing. I think the thing about Dave is
Yeah.
that he's a big boy who like
Yeah.
I don't think he totally like I think he's like the classic candidate for like a what not to wear or like
Yes,
a
I feel
tan
like,
France
yes,
to come in because
and be
he's
like,
not
you
really
need
like
to wear something
that fits your body type.
Like, you don't need to wear these
You
huge
don't-
shirts.
Well,
how good
I
does
actually
that
think
feel?
that he wears like tight
Too-
stuff that doesn't fit him.
I mean, across the board,
If he
I
could
feel
just like wear, if he did like big man like indie style, just like Carhartts and like a jacket, like he would look so much better.
No, I know. If he was like actually Carhartt jacket, done.
What
How
does he eat?
I mean,
he's a chef.
he's
Okay,
a
we
chef.
gotta-
We gotta cover that.
He loves
in the
food trucks.
episode.
He like what he eats
He
with all
actually
the.
doesn't really love food trucks.
Well, okay, but in some way, I do think he sort of paved the way for food truck culture in a way because it's like it's all about just like elevated stuff for the masses, and it's what the chefs eat when they get off work.
But you know what he doesn't even really talk about is where he opened up his LA restaurant is where Ron Choi had a restaurant who he actually did invent food trucks. Ron Choi is who the movie Chef is based off of.
Right.
He invented the like Korean fusion food truck. Basically, he's kind of like so, and I feel like
David Chang is very jealous.
Is a little bit jealous in that way, and he kind of just references Ron Choi like once.
Yeah. No,
but doesn't really go into it. So
because
and,
he tried to invent the Korean Chipotle and it failed.
Yeah.
That was what Sambar originally was supposed to be.
And then but it turned into a wonderful salad bar. So.
Yes.
But I think it's funny because watching him in this Ugly Delicious at home, he actually still was being so chef and was being so like, ugh, there's like nothing in the fridge and I'm making this like nasty dish for my wife that she craves for some reason. And it was like soybean paste and rice.
But he is a little bit like, I know he's canceled, but Batali snacks where it's just like, okay, it's snack time. Like, let me get a couple cucumbers, a little bit of oil, some chili pepper, some dashi, some furikake, bam. And it's just like pouring spices it is delicious and it is cucumber, but like it actually tastes really good and like it's delicious. And his kid is eating like a king.
The funniest things that he said that I feel like is so true and I think like called me out when I think I'm trying to be such a chef at home. He was like, if I see one more fucking radish as a garnish on a menu, yes. I will lose my mind. And it's like, that is so like me at home if I'm like trying to like spark up a dinner, being like, what if I like put radishes on this?
I mean, they do
They're colorful. They're crisp.
The bright white, the bright red. It's
and
like,
I think that's obviously totally fine for a home cook like myself, but I'm sure it's like he was just seeing that played out and played out and played out.
Okay, wait. Who are you in the book?
This is, it's kind of great. I was like, usually in the books we read, I think of it throughout.
I was actually terrified that I was David Chang, but the thing is because I know that I can be a little bit intense sometimes about like final creative products.
Final creative process and
But I was like, but I'm not
and,
abusive and soon.
No.
And I don't use my menacing physical stature to terrorize my subordinates.
No, obviously.
I don't have subordinates.
I
wish I did.
There's a little bit, sure, like your sharp tongue, it comes out in such a different way.
Thank you.
Which is almost harsher. I think David Chang has this full baby tantrum when he freaks out, and you're a little more, will just like say something like super sharp and cutting.
And more of an Oscar Wilde, if
yes,
you will.
Exactly. And then maybe like, why the fuck isn't it like this how I want it? So... Sure, maybe you're 10% Chang.
Okay, I think you're maybe kind of the gruff bartendress at that Midtown bar that he goes to with Anthony Bourdain, who and David Chang is just like, could we have a seat by the window? Because like my famous friend like gets talked to a lot. And she's like, oh, honey, Tony? He's sitting at the bar already.
I also kind of think like maybe I'm toasty, like maybe I am the milk bar, like. And
yeah, you're launching this pastry empire? I don't know. You're so not like sweet tooth pastry girl.
No, I was more just thinking I feel like she's a little more like calm, cool, and collected to David Chang's like mania. Sure. I don't think I'm a pastry girl.
Right.
Because I'm not like I'm
cookies,
so
really.
Savory.
Yeah.
Like yes, I'll have
This is a savory podcast.
Yeah, like yes, whatever they're like compost like crock cookies or whatever that they serve. Like I am like yum, but it's like I will so much rather have like another serving of Bosom before I have a cookie.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I think I'm the bartendress.
Oh wait, can I just say something that I completely forgot to mention? So the restaurant he opens in Sydney, the accolade that it wins from the Sydney Morning Herald, 2 hats.
Stop. 2 hats.
2 hats.
2 hats.
It got 2 hats. That's the highest. That's the most hats that any restaurant's gotten in years.
At the same time, I kind of think like who we on the book, like we're kind of just like 2 people standing in line at Momofuku.
We're at line at like every Momofuku waiting
and
for
like
noodles at 10:30. Or we're the 2 people who come in at 10:30 p.m. for that last meal, and he's like, you do not discriminate against those guests.
Yeah,
because you don't know you don't know where they're coming from or why they want to come in here for grub at 10:30, and they deserve a good meal like everyone else.
It's so funny. He's like, fuck someone who like talks shit about the plate, but he has such a respect because I think this is the ethos of Momofuku. Is the late night eater.
Yes. We just got off work, bitch.
And it's just like, yeah, we just got off work and like
we just finished podcasting.
And we want
to spend $80 on cocktails and ramen. Well, listen, I think that Dave Chang is a revolutionary.
He's a revolutionary. He's controversial. He's actually really not a controversial character.
He's literally not a controversial figure
Only
at
to
all.
us, I guess. He's a revolutionary. He has demons.
No, but people in the food industry, like, if you mention him, they will be like, oh, Dave Chang.
Well, and some people are like hotheads. So he is,
Yeah.
He is. I think to read this book, I feel like at first I was like, I love it. In the middle, I was kind of like, eh. By the end, I was like, I'm wrapped up.
I got way more into it by the end because I was like, okay, you are like talking about stuff that I want to hear about. You're
I want to compare it a little bit to an Apatow movie.
What movie?
all Apatow movies that are 2.5 hours
that
long.
are literally 3.5 hours
and this
long.
book
It's like,
isn't even that long, but you're into the beginning.
It feels long with the footnotes.
That's what I'm saying. It feels long, and you're kind of into it, but there are slow points, and you're like, can we wrap this up a little bit? By the end, you're like, sure, I liked it.
Yeah. It's very, very about his own demons.
Stuff. So I think if you're into food, if you're into David Chang, I would say read it. I would say if you're not, like...
What's interesting is, like, there's not a ton of, like, food
well,
content.
I was
not really that food
I was going to say,
focused.
like, in my
He
earliest
barely talks
notes,
about, like, recipes
it was
and
like,
shit.
I might be more interested...
If we talk more about, like, how we came up with the
Food,
full like
yes.
palette of this restaurant.
Because whenever he was like, oh, and then we tried this with like the chickpeas and we fermented this, I was like, I might be more interested. And maybe he thinks he's like played that out so much in all of his articles for Lucky Peach and the show.
Yeah.
And this was like his psychological journey. I do wish there was more actual food talk.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, like, you know,
for
I
like
don't...
total food nerds, you know what I
If
mean?
we're going to read one food memoir, I would still say read Kitchen Confidential.
Yeah.
But if you want to follow up, I think it makes a very interesting companion piece to Kitchen Confidential.
Absolutely. And like a new generation of chefs.
New generation and...
different types of foods. So also
Well,
someone
it's
from
the
who
same-
is more of a vision, much more of an actual visionary.
Actual
with food,
visionary who changed food in a very different way as
where
an
I think
actual chef.
Bourdain changed food writing.
He changed food... Well, I think he also changed the way people perceive the food industry.
The chef, yes, in
Yeah.
the industry.
Um,
So I give it like, I'm going to say I give it 3.5
Peaches.
bows.
okay, yeah, I give it 3.5 peaches as well.
Yeah.
This was a super medium quality book, and I'm very excited to get into our next memoir.
I'm truly so excited. It's by Jennifer Lewis, and the book is The Mother of Black Hollywood.
Jennifer Lewis, famous Black actress. She's been in many
She
movies.
literally has been in everything.
She's been in like every mainstream Black comedy.
Sitcom movie, Broadway.
Sitcom movie, Broadway.
You probably most recently know her from playing Anthony Anderson's mother on Blackish.
Hit sitcom Blackish.
ABC.
ABC, Wednesdays at 8. So we're going to dig into her memoir, and feel free to read along or don't. Also, make sure to follow us on Twitter at CBCThePod.
And again, please rate us and like leave a super fun review. Like stretch your David Chang muscle and just like leave a review and write it. And like
Yeah, dig into eater culture, dig into Yelp culture,
Review,
okay?
you
Tell
know
us
what
what
I
you really
mean?
think, unless it's less than 5 stars, in which keep it to yourself, sweetheart.
all right, well, ciao, ciao.
Mucho ciao. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for listening.
We'll see you at Momofuku, Las Vegas.
Okay, bye. Buy your tickets.
Ciao.
Bye.
Celebrity Book Club is presented by Prologue Projects and HeadGum. The show is produced by Meg Murnane. She's like literally fucking awesome. With editorial support from Andrew Parsons and Leah Nafok, who's actually the best in the biz. Like, actually go get beers with this guy if you know what's good for you. Engineering by Ferris Monchi, my dog. Original theme song by Stephen Phillips' horse, Genius. Artwork by Teddy Blanks at Chips NY, another god. Follow us on Twitter at CBCThePod. Subscribe on your favorite fucking app, you loser. Leave us a review. Don't forget to tell your friends about us. It's like, let's just like all fucking hang out or something. I don't know. Like, you seem like good people.
Dude, let's order strippers.
That was a HeadGum podcast.